I'm a senior polymers engineering major. The other people, Custa is our treasurer, and Trad, who's just taking care of things backstage, is our vice president. And we have two people who might be standing up, Kavya and Deja. So it's because of all of that we have this event here today. So thank you guys for your help. I have the privilege and honor of introducing our guest speaker, Dr. Pattanaik. He writes and lectures extensively on the relevance of mythology in matters related to leadership, entrepreneurship, branding, management, and governance. He serves as the Chief Belief Officer of the Future Group. Trained in medicine, he spent 15 years in healthcare and the pharmaceutical industries, including Apollo Health Street, Sanofi Aventis, before he joined Ernst & Young as a business analyst. All this while, he spent his spare time studying and writing on sacred stories. And there he met Kishore Biani of the Future Group, who convinced him to turn his hobby into a vocation. Currently, he's the leadership coach and inspirational speaker to many organizations besides the Future Group. His columns on management and culture that appear in the Economic Times are hit with the general and specialist readers. His show, Business Sutra, with CNBC 18 and Shasta's with CNBC Awaz are popular with viewers for their innovative approach and simplicity. He has written over 25 books for everyone from adults to children, for youth to business executives. It is my pleasure on behalf of the Yuva chapter at Case Western Reserve University to welcome Dr. Devdutt.
Good evening. Can you all see the slides? This is part of
Page. Microphone.
Hi. So let me tell you something about myself. I've been writing mythology for a very long time, and this is some of my books. So these are children's books, and then there are books for adults, and basically this retells the narrative, the great epics of India, which is around 2,000 years old. And these are the epics of India told in different ways. That's a book on calendar art, because many people look at calendar art, but I realize they don't understand the symbols behind it and the language and the architecture of these ideas. They broadly are excited by the content, which is bright and colorful, but I realize that many people don't know how to read them. There's a method of reading them. And so I started writing these books, and I've been writing it for the last 17 years. And then I discovered something very interesting, that the more deeper you go into mythology, the more you understand how people think. And you discover, for example, if you read the Iliad and the Odyssey, you understand how the Greeks think. And if you read the Ramayana and Mahabharata, you understand how the Indians think. When you read stories of different parts of the world, they reveal different patterns of thought. And that was very exciting, and that led me to write Business Sutra. Business Sutra is an Indian approach to management, because I noticed something very interesting, that many people, we sometimes take for granted. You see, management as we know it is about 100 years old. And if you look at all the books of management, or at least the top 100 books of management, you realize they're all written by men. They're all written by men of European or American descent. And the question therefore arises, if the ideas that they have written is influenced by the culture that they belong to. If all the management books were written by Arabs, would the management principles be different? If all the management books were written by the people from Japan, would the management principles be different? What if all the management books were written by people from Africa? Would the management principles be different? So this is a hypothesis that led me to understand what is the structure that is followed in what we call management today. And when you start tracing the history of management, you realize something that it initially in the 19th century was called industrial engineering, and And if you trace its roots, you can trace its roots to Jesuit missionary activities, you can trace it to the Roman army, and you realize that the idea has emerged in a very European setting, and it follows a certain pattern and a methodology which is repetitive and is now taught throughout the world. But the world is changing. People are working with people from different parts of the world, and the question is, will the same principles apply in a global village? So if you're posted, say, in Indonesia, and your clients are in Brazil, and your vendor is located in France, and your business partner is located in South Africa, do the same principles apply? Or can business be seen differently by different people? These are thoughts that made me wonder, and I thought a simple method of trying to understand how people think and how different parts of the world functions is through storytelling, and to appreciate storytelling patterns. I call myself a mythologist because I find the word myth very satisfying, and I'll explain why. Because it sort of helps you understand many things about the human condition. But before that, I just want to give just a simple test with you, and you just observe and make you think about certain things. Look at this number, 9/11. Does it mean September 11th or 9th of November? I was raised in Indian schools which follow the British way of dating, which is DDMMYY. So you first write the date, then you write the month, and then you write the year. So for me, all my life, 9/11 meant 9th of November. But somewhere in the media, it started meaning September 11th, and I realized there was a different system of dating. The dating was MMDDYY, which was followed in America. Which is the more rational method? Which is rational? DDMMYY or MMDDYY? And really you can't answer the question. It depends on which part of the world you belong to. It's a huge problem that is faced in the IT industry. How do you date things? Because this can create a lot of confusion. And yet we assume rationality. We assume that the whole world thinks exactly the same way, but even a simple thing like dating, and we can't agree upon it. And you see a shift in meaning as you move through geography. Now, look at this word and tell me, what is the meaning of the word gay? What did it mean for Jane Austen? It meant happy, and today it has a completely different meaning. So the meaning has changed over history. So you have meanings changing over geography, you have meanings changing over history. A word which meant happy in the 19th century now means homosexual in the 21st century. Which is the correct meaning? And therefore, to understand the meaning of a word, you have to contextualize it in space and time. Which leads me to the word myth. What does this word mean? What does it mean in India? What does it mean in America? What does it mean in Europe? What does it mean in the 19th century? What did it mean in the 20th century? What does it mean in the 21st century? And suddenly you realize the meanings are very different. In the 19th century, it was meant to describe narratives that are false. In the 21st century, it has a very different meaning. Thanks to work done in postmodern literature in the 1970s, currently work going on in what is called postmodernism. And people have realized that the meaning is very different. So let me clarify the meaning that I use. Myth is the study of subjective truth. My truth, your truth. The question is, when I talk to you over across the table, what do I focus on? Do I focus on my truth? Do I focus on your truth, or do I focus on something called the truth that I have no access to, you have no access to, But in an argument, I insist my truth is the truth and your truth is false. What do I focus on in a conversation between two people? I have found value when you start realizing that everybody looks at the world differently, and therefore every human being has a different my truth. So right now in this room there are about 50 people. There are 50 my truths in this room. On this planet we have 7 billion people. We have 7 billion my truths. Now the question is, how do I understand this my truth? So I cluster. I start clustering things. And it's for the sake of simplicity. So I cluster things as Indian truth, Chinese truth, Brazilian truth, Nigerian truth, Australian truth, European truth, American truth. I use different words to cluster ideas together. And that enables me to understand cultures, but it remains subjective. Now another way of looking at the word myth is to call it a belief. And what is belief? Commonly the word belief is understood as a religious idea. But it basically means something that is indifferent to rationality. An idea that I cling on to that is indifferent to rationality, that doesn't care for rationality. And so myth is equal to belief. Another way of looking at it is assumptions. What are the assumptions on the basis of which you look at life? So we all have a set of assumptions on the basis of which we look at the world. If I change those assumptions, your understanding of the world changes. Every culture has a set of assumptions. And these assumptions define for us what is right, what is wrong, what is good, what is bad, what is appropriate, what is inappropriate. So we all have a set of assumptions. Yeah? So mythology is the study of cultural assumptions. Now the question is, let's understand this a little better, and I will use a simple metaphor to explain this to you. And this metaphor comes from a very simple Indian traditional practice called a rangoli or kolam. Some of you who are from the southern part of India or have traveled to the southern part of India may have seen this. What is this thing that I'm talking about? Rangoli, in the northern part of India it's called rangoli, in the southern part it's called kolam. It is essentially an art created by women. Every day in the morning, the lady of the house creates a pattern in front of her house. It's something like brushing your teeth. Every day in the morning you brush your teeth in order to feel fresh. The kolam is created to refresh the household. And it's an art of women. And it is a very simple pattern. It is essentially a set of dots. It's a set of dots, it's a grid of dots. And you take a line around to include all the dots to create a radially symmetrical pattern. So it's not random joining of the dots. A pattern has been created. So look at this pattern. And now all of us in this room, now our mind is something like this. Our mind is like a column. The dots are the data and the information that we receive from the outside world. And we keep receiving data and information from the outside world 24/7. And we try to make sense of the world by creating a pattern. And this is the kind of pattern we create. We try to include all the pieces of information to create a radially symmetrical pattern that makes sense to us, which is coherent. And we make this pattern, and that's how we make sense of the world. This line, this pattern is what I call belief, assumption, myth, subjective truth. This is how I make sense of the world. It is influenced by, either by looking at other people, it can be influenced by tradition, it can be influenced by my parents, it can be influenced by popular culture. But the fact is, all of this, ultimately, it is I who draw the line. It is I who create the pattern, the column in my mind to make sense of the world. Now what happens when I increase the number of dots? The pattern becomes more complex. So here you have a much more complex pattern created by this lady. Now either she's intuitively brilliant or she's been practicing it so many times that now she has achieved the skill of creating this fantastic pattern. And the same thing applies to you when you receive more and more information and you try to include more and more data into your head, you start creating more and more complex patterns. You're able to handle complex patterns. Now some of us don't want to handle complex patterns, so we don't let new data enter our mind, we block it out. We fossilize ourselves, we are threatened by new data and we don't want it to enter because we disturb the column in my mind because a new pattern will emerge. But then what happens is even the old set of dots, the dots that you already have, you can join them differently on a different day. So here you have another pattern joined, the same dots have been joined differently by a lady. In this room, if I gave everybody in this room an 8 by 8 grid and asked her to join the dots, each one of you will join it differently. Each pattern will be radially symmetrical, each pattern will be beautiful, each pattern will be unique, each pattern will be yours, each pattern will be different. And that's what happens across the world. We have 7 billion people, there are 7 billion patterns in this world. Some simple, some complex, each one dynamic, transforming over time. So 10 years ago, you had a view of the world. 10 years hence, you will have a new view of the world because your understanding of the world will change. And therefore, your belief patterns keep changing. So contrary to popular belief, belief is not something that's static, it's constantly transforming. And your mind is constantly transforming. And it's getting new information and you're opening up. And as you keep opening up your mind, as you keep receiving more data, something interesting happens. You start noticing that other people create different patterns. You suddenly realize that, hey, I have a pattern in my life, but other people have a different pattern. And you start appreciating that pattern. You start commenting on that pattern. You start judging that pattern. You start learning from that pattern. And a new pattern emerges. A completely new pattern emerges. Now, suddenly you are exposed to multiple patterns. And eventually you reach a point where you have to deal with so many patterns. Look at this. This is a festival in Chennai called the Mayapur Festival in the southern part of India. And these are ordinary housewives who have created patterns on the street. And this pattern, each pattern is beautiful, each pattern is unique. Each pattern is based on a grid of dots. And this is something like this room. In this room there are so many columns out there. Each one is beautiful. The question is, how do we develop the ability to appreciate multiple patterns? Because if we believe there is a perfect pattern out there, then we'll neither value our pattern or your pattern. But the moment I realize that my pattern is different, your pattern is different, all patterns are incomplete and each pattern is perfect. And suddenly, the way of looking at life changes. And we start approaching things very, very, very differently because we start seeing things and we start appreciating things. And this is a metaphor I want to bring to you because mythology is something like this. Every time I hear a story, I see a pattern. Every time I see a symbol, I see a pattern. Every time I hear a ritual, I watch a see complaining. And suddenly you realize there's a pattern emerging. Oh, there's a pattern to this. Now, if you want to be friends with this person, you never tell them that your pattern is wrong. You sort of acknowledge their pattern and says, yeah, it makes sense. That's right, the world is a horrible place. And they become your friends because in a way you are acknowledging their pattern. And they feel suddenly that, hey, you like my pattern. Now, it doesn't mean it's a right pattern. It's an incomplete pattern, but it's a pattern, his pattern. Or for example, symbols. You notice that some people always wear black. Some people always wear white, some people always wear bright, gaudy colors, and some people always wear mismatched socks. And some people are very particular about the way they dress and what symbols they carry around them, and everything reveals who they are. But only if you pay attention. If you take the trouble to pay attention, you'll recognize that they're telling you a story, they're revealing the pattern of their mind. Or rituals. There are always people who come on time. There are always people who don't come on time. There are always people whose desk is super organized. And there are always people whose desk is always chaotic. And each of this is a pattern that is revealing something about the mind. It's just that we don't pay attention to it. We think it is insignificant, but for me it's a data point. And I want to take you to the next 6 slides, a set of data points for you to understand cultures, because I focus on cultures more than individuals. How to see the patterns of a culture. So I'm going to show you 6 slides now. There are 3 sets of 2 slides each to show you how to see a pattern and therefore how to figure out what the column of a culture is. So let's look at this pattern. So that's the idea. How to increase the mind while understanding patterns. Look at this pattern. It's a crematorium. In one part of the world, when people die, the body is embalmed, dressed up beautifully, placed in a coffin, buried under the earth, and a tombstone is placed to mark the grave. The name is written on the tombstone, the date of birth, date of death, maybe the names of loved ones. It's a permanent tag. 10 years later, when I visit this place, I can see the tombstone unless it has been vandalized. But I know 10 years later who is the person buried over here. Even 100 years later, the tombstone will be there. 200 years later, it will be there. So, for example, when I go to the pyramids, I know that somebody was buried here, someone who valued his life so much that he used huge resources of his land to build his tomb. Because his life mattered so much that the pyramid had to be built. Or when I go to the Taj Mahal, which many people think is a palace, but is actually a tomb, it reminds me that the person who built the palace thought that the person buried there is so important that the resources of the kingdom should be used to build and mark that life permanently. Now this is one pattern. Let's look at another pattern. In another part of the world, they just burn the body and throw the ashes in the river. No permanent marker. No reference to the fact that the person ever lived. No memory of it at all. Just wiped out of memory. So next day there is no trace of the person. There is absolutely no physical trace of the person. So 2 different patterns from different parts of the world. Permanent marker, no markers. Does it tell me something about people? I don't know, but let's just keep it in mind. I'm sorry for showing something so morbid, but now let's go to something more delightful. Food. So much for dramatic effect. So look at this. This is a formal meal. If you're invited by the Queen of England or the President of the United States for a formal state dinner, you will be shown this. In all probability. Look at this meal carefully. The moment you look at it, you know it's a 4-course meal. Complete transparency. Now observe the pattern of the ritual. You will be served soup, then starter, then main course, then dessert. Each of these dishes have to be eaten with a particular cutlery. It's all choreographed. Until you finish your soup, you will not get the starter. Until you finish the starter, you will not get the main course. Until you finish the main course, you will not get the dessert. It is sequential. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. It's linear. It's centrally controlled. So if all of us get the same soup, the same starter, we're going to eat the same thing. At best, you can garnish it with salt and pepper. Right? So you see the pattern. Now patterns become obvious when you compare them. That's why I'm comparing. Comparison helps you understand patterns. This is another way of serving food. All things served simultaneously. Soup, starter, main course, dessert. You can start with the dessert, it's allowed. You can take the starter and dip it in the soup. That is also allowed. Only one rule, eat with your right hand. And so different people in this room, if I serve the same dish to all of you, you will mix and match the food in different proportions, in different ways. So what happens when you put the food in your mouth is what you taste is unique to you. It is the ultimate in customization. It's the ultimate user experience. Now what does it mean? It is not linear, it is circular, it is not sequential, it's simultaneous. It is not central control but peripheral control. It is the user who defines the experience. A very different way of serving the food. Now if I ask which is the right way to serve the food, this way or that way, there is no right answer. Logically, food has to be hygienic, food has to be nutritious, food has to be tasty, served on time. But how do you serve the food varies from culture to culture. If I were to get a Chinese gentleman, he would say that this is not the right way to eat food. You don't eat with your hands, that's barbaric. You don't know where the hands have been. And you don't eat in this way either. You don't keep weapons on the table. You have to cut the fruit and vegetables in a right proportions so that people can pick it up with the right way called chopsticks. And that's a third pattern, a different pattern emerges. So suddenly you see even the act of eating is ritualized and patterns are created in different parts of the world. Now let's look at another set of patterns. This is a US dollar bill. How many languages on it? One. Maybe two, there's Latin on the other side. This is an Indian rupee note. How many languages can you see on it?
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. It's a very famous quiz question in India, and most Indians don't know the answer to it. Because you take it for granted. You don't realize that having 17 languages on the currency note is not that common. Very different pattern. This is a multicultural, diverse society with one language on the currency note. This is also a multicultural, diverse society with 17 languages on the currency note. Why the difference in pattern? And suddenly you notice a very different pattern. It makes you think different patterns. What does it reveal about society? Does it reveal anything about society? This is random. And suddenly if you put them together, you get two columns. And you start comparing and contrasting, and something emerges. Any guesses? Can you guess? One is systematic, the other doesn't seem to be that systematic. That's one way of looking at the pattern, any other pattern? One is circular.
No, it's the different patterns, like the squares and the dots.
Okay, yes. But what is the difference in these two patterns? If I were to look at a column, this is A and B. Don't try to look at it from a cultural lens. Look at this as culture A and culture B. And you all are Martians. Okay, so don't think of yourself as Americans or anything. You're all Martians. You have come and you see two patterns. Yeah.
How different things are collaborated and exist together in a collaboration on the right part.
Okay.
Whereas on the left part is a single thing that's existing as compared to somewhere where
Okay. See, there's no right answer over here. Just I want you to start thinking and observe the patterns. There's no right and wrong answer. Just start thinking. Just try to see the patterns. Anything else? Can you see anything else?
Well, one is the symmetry of overorder versus the other is the symmetry of layers.
Okay, that's another way of looking at it. Any other way?
Very defined perimeters in culture A. Culture B is a lot more unified, a lot more mixed together.
Okay, that's another way of looking at it. Any other way? So patterns are there, yeah.
in the section B, one place they're erasing every memory, whereas on the currency note they're specifying every
Anything else? Yeah.
Simplex versus complex.
Okay, simplex versus complex. Another thing. Which is simplex, which is complex?
The audience decides.
Okay. Suddenly you see these patterns, and this is what I see. One life, therefore that one life matters. Many lives, so no single life matters. One user experience in one life, multiple user experiences in multiple lives. One language to bind everybody, multiple languages to keep everyone together. So one and many, one and many. Now the hard thing of the human mind is this, and you'll observe this happening right now. Observe yourself observing. Try to observe yourself observing. And you know what will happen? You'll see that you can't help but you want to judge it. Your mind is constantly telling you one is better than the other. That's the nature of our mind. We can't help but judge. Judgment is so natural to us. And yet, to get the pattern, you must not judge. You have to see the pattern for itself. And suddenly you see one to many. Now let's extend this to something else. Something more, what we call these things cultural. Let's lead to something realistic. Here you are. That's a road in North Korea, and that's a road in Hyderabad in India. South Korea, South Korea. Two patterns. Now compare and contrast without judging. And look how your mind is trying to do something. And you realize how you observe it, because you can't see patterns now. And yet, the same pattern is there, exactly the same pattern. In fact, that we assume it is a road, but actually it's a marketplace with a road through it. This is a road and there is no marketplace. This is a road with a marketplace. This is, and suddenly when you start looking at patterns, but the problem with patterns, as I said, is that we want to judge. And this is the judgment that most people will go through. It's the right way to have a road, and that's a wrong way to have a road. This is right and that is wrong. We judge it. We find it very, very difficult to simply understand it and say, hey, this is one way, that's another way. We can't help it. We just want to impose one way. And that's a natural thing. And if you don't overpower this, you'll never understand. We're too busy judging. We keep saying don't be judgmental, but as humans, we are judgmental. Now I want to show you 7 slides of the same image, show you 7 different ways in which you can see exactly the same pattern. And now you see how these patterns start talking to you. 7 different ways to show you. There are many more ways, but I've decided to select 7 ways. So the first way of looking at these 2 things is like this. That's diverse and this is efficient. Highly efficient, inefficient. Diverse, not diverse. Singular. One way of looking at the pattern. Diverse. I'm not commenting on effectiveness, I'm just commenting on efficiency and diversity. And you suddenly ask yourself, hey, if I become a diverse society, will I lose my efficiency? And if I become an efficient society, will it compromise on my diversity? Questions to ask. There you are. Another way of looking at the pattern. Enforcement of one way, empathy for many ways. Another way of looking at the same 2 patterns. I'm a Martian, I'm looking at it, I'm coming up with different ways of looking at the same thing. One is enforcement, the other is empathy. Another way. Rule submission, rule averse. And observe how the mind wants to judge it. Sheep and goat, wolf and dog. Another way of looking at it. Excludes and includes. one pattern over the other. Because language is highly manipulative. And we don't realize language manipulates things. In every word there is a value judgment. And I'm subtly influencing your decisions. Very subtly. So when I use exclusive and inclusive, depending on the context, certain words are better than the others. Another way of looking at this pattern. Central control, peripheral control. Another way of looking at the pattern. My pattern is right. Your pattern is also right. So even if you're on the wrong side of the road, it's okay. I'll adjust. I'm tolerant to the fact that you've broken the rule. And still another way, this is the classical economist approach. Resource rich and homogeneous. Crowded, poor and heterogeneous. And I explain the column very differently. I show different context creating different patterns. And observe again how your mind is working right now. So as long as I focused on this, which was non-threatening, it was fine. The moment it became reality, something started to shift. And it's happening in your mind right now. It's not, I'm just providing you stimulation. And I don't want to conclude at this point because there is no conclusion. It is to show you patterns. These patterns are subjective truths of different communities. These are what we call myths, beliefs, assumptions of what is appropriate and what is inappropriate, what is right and what is wrong. And this is reflective in narratives throughout the world. So I want you to tell you two stories before I conclude this pattern search. This tells the story of the Greek hero Bellerophon. When he sees a creature that is not quite a goat or a serpent or a lion, he declares that it is a monster and proceeds to destroy it. He destroys it and therefore comes to be known as a hero. On the other side is a character from the Mahabharata called Arjuna, who in the forest encounters a strange beast that is part rooster, part peacock, part human, elephant, bull, lion, tiger, serpent and deer. He's so overwhelmed by this creature that he lays down his weapons and bows down, saying, I cannot conquer you, I'd rather understand you. And in effect, these are two parts of our mind. This is the left brain, what is crudely called the left brain, the desire to singular things out, to classify and control things and organize things so that they make sense and are not so frightening, that can't handle uncertainty. And there's a right side of our brain that is very comfortable with patterns, can handle uncertainty, can handle ambiguity, and doesn't seek control and organization. And both these parts exist in us through stories. The question is, which part do you favor? Do you want to be the Greek hero Bellerophon, who organizes and makes things efficient? Do you want to be Arjuna, who allows things to be inefficient but enables diversity? These are the questions that will come across the world in the next 20 years as the world becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. Which way do you want to go? Efficiency or diversity? Enforcement or empathy? One way or many ways? And I hope all of you make the decisions that helps you become great leaders.